Welcome back to Awakened Exchanges. I'm your host, Jay Rich, and I want to thank you all for joining us today. For those that are just joining us for the first time this week, I want to give you a very warm welcome to the exchange. We truly value all of the positive energy, and I hope you continue to join us each and every week. You listeners are the most important part of this podcast, and I appreciate every single one of you. Please remember, if you have any suggestions for topics or guests, I do listen to the listeners, and I look forward to hearing from you either from our website, or you can contact me on Twitter at Awaken Exchanges. I know what you're thinking. 3 episodes in a week. What in the world is going on? He hasn't done 3 episodes in a month most of the time this lately. Anyway, don't get used to it quite yet. Like I said in the last two, it's been a crazy busy year, but I really wanted to get these out before the Portal to Ascension Conference this weekend, April 21st through 23rd, live in San Diego, and that's 2023. If you're listening to this in the future, find some fun stuff on YouTube. I'm sure that's out there. If you're listening to it live right now, you really should join us in San Diego. It's going to be an awesome time with a little bit of everything. Just all angles on all of these interesting topics we've been covering over the last 6 or 8 episodes now. So, like the other couple this week, these were supposed to air a couple of months ago, before my last laptop died, before I lost, I had to start working 5 to 6 days a week, and the hours, and but anyway, we at least got it out before the conference, right? Just like when I recorded with Joan, Sheila was recorded right as I was in the beginning of my second round of COVID. So I hope my voice isn't too far off. There's a little bit of an echo. I think I got most of it out of there. Our conversation was actually one of my more unexpected ones. I really did not know what to expect. I'd never heard of the term walk-in before, and I still don't really know what to make of it. Sheila, however, seemed mostly open, really genuine, and I don't know. I listened to her. I liked hearing what she had to say. I hope you like hearing what she had to say and enjoying her story, and listen to it with an open mind. Short enough of an intro for you. All right, well, the length of these are going to change as I feel fit, but I've recorded this as the third one right now, and you've already got the update if you listened to one a couple back. So if not, go listen to the intro on Alan and listen to the whole episode. It's pretty good. Yeah, either way, enjoy the episode today. I hope that you remember that you guys are actually the reason I'm making these episodes. I want to thank each of you personally for your support. Just listening and sharing this podcast with your friends gives me a reason to keep providing the best content I can. And if you have the means and would like to contribute personally, please take a look at our Patreon page, where you will get access to exclusive content and deals. Your personal support there and at Awaken Vapes are what's funding this podcast, so I truly hope you know how much I appreciate each and every one of you. And remember, if you enjoy this podcast, please follow us on Spotify, subscribe to us on YouTube, or wherever else you're listening. And please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast. I know every podcast says it because it really does help spread the word. So you can also support us on Patreon or connect with us on the social media of your choice. We are at Awakened Exchanges on Facebook and Instagram, and at Awaken Exchanges on Twitter. All right, now stay tuned, and thank you for listening to Awakened Exchanges.
Welcome back to Awakened Exchanges. I'm so glad to be here today with Sheila Seppi, the author of Walk-ins, The Cosmology of the Soul, and a self-proclaimed walk-in herself. Hi, Sheila.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm sure there's going to be some in our audience who are already familiar with you, but just in case, would you mind telling those that aren't a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, I'm Sheila Seppi. I live in Colorado. I have a wellness center that I run Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. My son works with me and also runs it with me, who is also a walk-in and is in my book, Walk-ins Cosmology of the Soul. And it's very, very rare to have two walk-ins to come into the same family. I'll talk about that in a minute. But for me, my journey really began back in 1999, and I was a very sick person. I had been diagnosed medically with the potentials of brain tumors. They told me that by the time that I was in my 40s, I would most likely be in a wheelchair with MS. Had migraines every day, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue. In my 30s, I was diagnosed with bone cancer. I just had a plethora of illnesses. And what happened to me is I also had like RA, the beginning stages of rheumatoid arthritis. And I was on tons of medications. So I went to bed a very, very sick person. And what seemed to be like 7 o'clock in the morning, it felt like someone reached down, grabbed me by the hair of my head, and pulled me bolt right up in bed. And then
Wow.
it was like lightning ran through my body. And then I was in white space. And I don't know how long I was in white space, but I do know that when I was there, I had no pain. I felt very, very comfortable. I felt this overwhelming sense of unconditional love. I did not see anyone around me, but I loved it. Wherever it was that I was, it was my place. And the next thing I knew, however, is my peripheral vision started coming in, and then my frontal vision. And as I sat there in bed looking around, of course, the first thing is, what the heck just happened? And then the next thing, when I got up out of bed and started walking across the carpet, it was like everything was the same, but everything was different. I didn't know what had happened. I had no ideas about walk-ins at the time. I did not know that I was 100% healed of all those documented illnesses. I was just kind of walking around in a daze. And when I walked by a mirror and I caught my glance, I was like, whoa. And I just stood there staring at myself. And it was as if I had seen myself for the first time. And of course, having been as sick as I was on the types of medication, I had a very dysfunctional marriage. I had 3 children that I was raising. I thought honestly I was having a psychotic break, because within minutes, all of this information started flooding into my body. The night before, if you had told me about a walk-in, I would have laughed, because I would never have believed such a thing could happen if it hadn't happened to me. I did not believe in past lives, and all of a sudden I was having this plethora of past lives just coming in, just kind of like a little movie screen. I had all of this information about universal knowledge, which first off, I could not understand what all was being downloaded into me. And of course, I didn't know it was a download at the time. But then also, I started remembering healing modalities that I had never studied, and ways, to extract illness and those types of things. And, for a normal person, and my background being psychology, I was like, well, between the medications, the dysfunctional lifestyle, the illnesses, I'm having a psychotic break. And when I tried to talk to people about what was happening to me, what I was experiencing, they were all kind of like doing this little number, backing up, kind of thing. And so I learned very quickly not to talk to people about it, because everybody thought I was losing my mind, that I was in fact psychotic. But within, just a very few short days, all of my behavioral patterns started to change. The way that I spoke started to change. My eating habits started to change. My thought processes started to change. And for the first time in many years, the brain fog was going away. And so within 3 months, I had left that dysfunctional marriage. And within another 3 months, I had moved to an entirely different state, had accepted another job, and was seeking counseling. Because again, I'm hearing voices, I'm seeing things, all this information, all these geometric shapes, all of this stuff is just flooding into my body. And again, I'd never studied it. I had never, ever read a book about metaphysics ever. And so I had no foundational background to even begin to understand what was happening. The other thing that I was really concerned about and why I truly sought out help to begin with was I didn't have memories. All of a sudden I had this deep love for my children and my parents, and that was it. I was very disconnected from everyone around me, and I could not remember things about my children. I couldn't
Hmm.
remember, I had very few select memories, but I couldn't remember like all of the birth process and what led up to the birth process and all of these types of things. And as a mom with 3 kids, of course, that really bothered me. And so I started seeking out a counselor. And I found an ad in the back of a telephone directory. So that dates, that's 20 years ago. We didn't
Yeah.
have Google, so I'm looking in the back of the phone book, and there was an ad for a spiritual counselor. And I went to see her, and I began seeing her on a regular basis because not only was she a spiritual counselor, she also had Hopi lineage. And she was a spiritual teacher and invited me to start attending some of her circle groups with these women, and learning about shamanism. And as I studied more and more about shamanism, I began to really drop into myself. Now, it was during these early counseling sessions that my teacher, who became my teacher, and I'm still a student to her 23 years later, but when my teacher started working with me, she's like, you know, there's nothing wrong with you. You are not having a psychotic break. You are having no psychosis of anything. I believe you're what's called a walk in. I'm like, a walk in? I've never heard of that. And she said that's when one soul makes a contract with another soul. And at a particular point in that person's life, the natal soul, which is the original soul to the body, leaves and a new soul comes in and takes its place. And so when she told me that, um, I was really upset. And because I went there thinking I was going to get a prescription for a blue pill, I could pop it and everything, like my dysfunctional life would go back to normal. However, that
Exactly.
thank God that never happened. And so one of the things that did happen, however, is as I was learning about shamanism, I began to connect with my spirit guides. And I began to understand that all of those voices that I was hearing in my head were not psychotic messages. They were actually my spirit guides because they were always loving messages. They were always, if I listened to them, they always helped to thwart um, any negativity that was going to be coming my way or anything like that. And then the people I saw walking around me, I understood were also my spirit guides. So as I began to learn shamanism and I began to develop my relationship with the guides, they are the ones that began to teach me truly about what a walk-in is. And I went many, many years without really talking about it or investigating it. I never read a book. Even to this day, I have flipped through and I have read passages. I've never read a book about walk ins. And my guides really had, until the last 3 to 4 years, kind of kept me in this little bubble so that everything that my knowing was my knowing and that it wasn't influenced by other things. Now that I, have a very firm understanding of what my knowing is, and I read these other things, it's like, oh my God, that validates what they've told me all along. I'm not alone in this thought process. And so I got very, very excited. But I guess it was 2000. No, it was in 2020, actually, that I was invited to an IONS conference in Colorado. And they invited me to be a speaker. And that is the first time. No, it was in 2019, that I was invited to talk about being a walk-in. That was the first time ever that I talked about my experience. And
Okay.
as I began to share my story, other people would begin to say, "Oh my God, I've had this happen. I've had that happen. Do you think it's a walk-in? Da 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 da." And so we began having these dialogues, but I never really found anyone who had had an experience kind of like my experience. And so I really began searching out because I knew I wasn't the only person here that was a walk in, and I knew other people had had other experiences that I later classified as soul experiences. But I started looking for other walk ins. And then in 20, I guess it was 2020, all of a sudden I had this weird illness that happened to me that really took me out for a while. And during that time, I was talking with Barbara Lamb, and she said, "Well, have you ever thought that maybe this is the opportunity for you to begin to write your book?" And I'm
Mm.
like, "Oh." So I began to process, how would I go about writing a book about being a walk-in? Because it was hard enough to make that one presentation about a walk-in, and they wanted a slideshow, and I put it together, and that began to really be the outline for the book that I was going to write. And I started interviewing other people who had walk-in experiences as well. The book has my experience, but it also has the experience of 15 other people. And to my surprise, there were all of these phenomenal experiences, and no one's was the same. Not one walk in had the exact same experience. There were commonalities. There were things that happened that, yes, they're a walk in where one soul left and another soul came in. But, like in the case of my son, who had peritonitis, they were doing exploratory surgery. His soul left and a new soul came in. And prior to his surgery, my husband and I both heard his soul cry out to be released. And it was in a language that I had never heard. I've never heard it since. A lot of people have said, "Well, was it light language?" And I'm like, I don't know what it was, but it sounded more to me like an Aramaic language. And as this language came out of him, now we're talking about the body of a little 7-year-old child, it was this man's voice that came out. And I was like, "Oh my God," we're just sitting there looking at each other. And after that experience, he was a totally different child. His asthma went away, all kinds of things had happened. And to jump back, when I went to my doctor's appointment, like a couple weeks after my experience, they had no explanation as to why all of my symptoms had gone away. They kept running test after test, absolutely nothing showed up. And so I was healed, but then I had to work on getting my health back,
Mhm.
you know, learn how to eat properly, drink water, that kind of thing. And with my son, he was 7 years old. So at first I didn't realize, even being a walk in myself, that he was a walk in.
And when was
Okay.
your son's? What year was that?
Gosh, I'd have to see. He's 25 now. He was 7 years old. So that had to be in 2003, something like
Okay.
that, 2003, 2004.
So,
And so
oh, go ahead.
when he when he came in, as he grew, he had gifts and talents that began to unfold. He came in from the angelic realm, and he has lots of information about the war of the angels, the way that the heavenly host were divided out, the way that the angelic realms are set up. And as a child, when they start telling you this information, it's like, well, he didn't read that in a book, you know.
Yeah, that's true.
And so anyway, when I was writing my book, I wanted to include his story because his experience is what I would call a soul infusion, where he actually brought in more of his higher self, his more of his oversoul energy. And my guides had given me this huge lesson on oversouls and how they're set up. And, we have our own individual, what they call the Shantias Khan. And then when we incarnate, the Shantias Khan is kind of like our little grocery store that we bring with us. It has everything we're going to need for this lifetime. And then the higher self comes from that. And then the higher self attaches to the physical body. And then that energy that enlivens everything is called the spirit, which is, your emotional, mental, physical, your spiritual bodies. And then what attaches to the body is called the soul. And that's the personality of this lifetime. But when you have a soul infusion like what my son had, he goes up through the Shantias Khan all the way back up into the oversoul and begins to bring that energy down and anchor it into the physical body. And so there were other people that I interviewed that I began to see, and what came to me, what my guide said, that it was called an overlay. And that's when when your soul is still intact, but maybe it's very weak. It needs a break, whatever the problem is. But this soul comes in and it overlays and it fits over your soul, kind of like a neoprene suit, and it can act as like a battery, because it can enliven, give more energy, or it can serve as a placeholder while that soul goes off to a resting place and then comes back. And then either the overlay leaves or the two of them merge together to form one soul. And then another type of walk in that was identified as the braided soul, where you actually have the original soul that stays, another aspect of the soul that comes in, and they braid together and operate as one soul. A lot of people have heard about that one. Then there's what's called a jumper. And that's where you have a soul that pops into the body and pops out pretty quickly. It can be there for hours, it can be there for days, it can be there for a month, but it's very short lived. And what happens is they come in and they imprint tons of information and then they're gone. And the people that I interviewed that are jumpers actually said they could miss that soul and that they would recognize that their consciousness was in the background as this other soul was operating. And they were just kind of like an observer, and then it was over. And then, of course, there's the multidimensional soul. And that's when you have many, many aspects of your soul, because our oversouls are so large that if you think of an octopus with tentacles that go out, each of those tentacles could actually be a Shantias Khan that's coming down and having its own experience, whether it's in this universe, in another dimension, on another planetary system, in another galaxy, whatever. And you can be having all of those experiences at once. Or you can bring in the memories of those lifetimes, and they then become activated within that soul. And so, at particular points in your lifetime, what could happen is you may operate more as a Palladian. And then that energy subsides, or you may act more as an Arcturian and bring through that information, because each of these galactic families has their own style in which they operate within this planetary system. And so there are people that I have identified now that are not walk-ins, that are having soul infusions. And I believe that's because the energy on the planet is changing so rapidly, and people are doing so much personal work that they're actually able to reach up and pull down more of their higher soul essence, their higher self. And they're operating as their higher self. But that's still like within the Shantias Khan information, but they're bringing in more and more and more of that. And they do not have to have a soul aspect to leave to make room for that. It's more of an integration process. And I see that happening with a lot of people right now. And so after I wrote this book, and I had interviewed these other 15 people, then I began to interview individuals who were in the field of science and consciousness to find out what their thoughts were about walk ins, because, I believed it. I knew I was one, but it's kind of hard to wrap your brain around that, or it was
It's
for me. I had to grow into that
when you said you
knowledge or
had a psychology background beforehand.
yes,
Oh,
yes,
what was your
yes.
background?
My background was in psychology, and so what I had worked in. Well, I don't have all of my memories, but
It's
some of the
okay.
jobs that I had worked, I had used that like in working in tourism. I had worked with multi-handicapped children. I had worked in a mental institution. I had done those types of
But coming
jobs.
from that background and that kind of definitive answer kind of setting into this was definitely a big change.
Well, absolutely. And not only that, but I was a fundamental Christian at the
Mm,
time. And so that just blew the lid right off my box because my belief systems was there's a heaven, there's a hell, you have one life. I thought that past lives were just, I told people one time, they said, "Have you ever read this book called Out on a Limb? Shirley MacLaine." I'm like, I don't want to hear about that because that's the biggest cop out for personal responsibility that I've ever heard. So, yeah, I believed in none of that. I mean, my thought processes were so limited during that time. And so I was like, I was 38 when this happened. And so being in that little box, one of the things people said, well, so, does that mean now that you don't believe in God? And I said, absolutely not. Now I know everything is God because coming from the other side and remembering, who I was before I even incarnated, that really puts a spin on things. And so for me, instead of coming from another planet, what I was in what's called a collective. And
okay.
we were working in the Andromedan system when we heard a cry from Gaia that was calling people. She was asking for assistance. So Dolores Cannon called that, the waves of the volunteers. And so we
Mm,
came um, in this time frame on earth. It would be like in the 80s. And so I was here for almost 20 years during the 80s and the 90s in this collective, but we were working within the crystalline grid system. And one of the things that I began to understand is within that crystalline grid system, that's almost like the if you will, it's like the neurological makeup of the planet. And
okay.
so that's where all the spiritual information, all the programming, and there's a system inside the earth, but it's kind of like a relay system where all this information comes in. But then there's the collective consciousness. So you've got the collective consciousness, and then over top of that, you've got this crystalline grid system. And so it's always infusing the collective consciousness, but it's also always infusing Gaia. But what we were doing was infusing unconditional love. We were bringing in light codes that would help people to spiritually wake up. And so when the soul of this body cried out to be released, it was decided by the collective that I would be the aspect to come in. And so initially, the aspects that I brought in were more of the Arcturian aspects because the soul of this body had been Arcturian and had laid a framework within the energetic system that allowed for this transition, this soul exchange to occur without frying the biology of this sick body. And so little by it was just kind of like a drip, little by little, more and more of that Arcturian information or soul would come in to replace that soul that had left. And within just a couple of weeks, the brain clarity, was back. It took, you know, years really for the body to be 100% back and healthy. It wasn't sick anymore, but I had to restore, you know,
Yeah.
um, the
It's not an
body and the
instantaneous healing.
yes.
It's the start of the process.
Yes, absolutely. And so also there was healing of the mind and the processes, and there was a healing of the, cellular makeup of the body too, because we bring in with us not just the genetics and the ancestral genetics, that bring this body to fruition, but we also have soul imprinting. And so I had to clear the soul imprinting of the other soul as well as the ancestral information, because, when this other soul left, there was still work to be done. So I had to agree to take on those contracts and to do all of that clearing, which that took a good 10 years. And honestly, every now and then, and even recently, there have been more and more deep-seated behavioral patterns, thought patterns, emotional mindsets that have come up to be cleared from the body. And I'm like, where did that come from? I don't even think that way. But, you still have to, you still have to do the work. You don't get a free pass. Walk-ins don't come into a perfect situation, but mine, I think, was as near perfect as could ever be, because I came in, I was able to get out of a dysfunctional marriage. I immediately had a teacher. I immediately had a support system with the Circle Women. I immediately moved into this other job. My kids had aunties and, more babysitters and more help than I could ever imagine. I had this huge support system that allowed me to heal physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, because I was also going through then a horrific divorce. And it was so hard for me because I could not wrap my brain around behavioral patterns. It's like, who acts this way? Who thinks this way? And in a way, that going through that divorce really helped to anchor me in the 3D, and then learning to work with my spirit guides helped that balance to keep my soul healed. And so at nighttime, obviously, just like we all astral travel at nighttime, but I would go back for more healing, more instructions, working with the collective, bringing in more and more energy. And so now that I've been here 23 years, I have more of the Andromedan energy that I work through, because I brought in the Andromedan, the Palladian, the Lyran, the Arcturian, the Christ consciousness energies, all of these energies that all of us have, because we have all had multiple lifetimes. And, at first it was like, well, why can't we all remember this stuff? Well, thank God we don't remember this stuff, because when we come into human form, it's for this human experience. And in my opinion, and what I have learned over all these years, is the ascension that we all talk about it is an ascension into our bodies. It is an ascension it is a merging into ourselves. It's an anchoring in to this human experience, knowing fully that we are spirits having a human experience, whether that spirits are Arcturian, whether it came in with Gaia and would be considered an earth seed, whatever it is, it's all about us anchoring in to who we are as a human species. Because when we leave this planet, we can all add to our resume that, oh yeah, we were an earthling too. Yeah, we've been Palladian, we've been an earthling, we've been this, we've been that. And that's really all it's about. Because what I know for a fact is everything is about experience. And there is no judgment. There is no good. There is no bad. Even things that happen that are horrific, that break our hearts, it's an experience. That's all it is. And there's no judgment about that experience on the other side. It's all for, how do we handle these experiences? Do we drop into that third dimensional, oh my God, I'm angry, I'm going to get back at this person, I've got revenge in my heart, I got hate? Or do we say, wow, that really hurt me. I wonder why that happened. What's the lesson that I can learn out of that? How can I grow from that experience? And when you take these horrific things that happen to us in life and we look at everything like it is a lesson, our whole lives can change, because we've changed our perspective, and no longer are we a victim. We are, a seeker. Then we are in gratitude. We can drop into gratitude for that person that we're angry with, because, oh, yeah, They were teaching me how to respond better. They were teaching me to break this cycle of anger. They were teaching me how to break this ancestral pattern that I've agreed to clear when I came in to this earth. And
It's
so,
interesting. There's so much of that that is tied into Buddhist beliefs and Hindu beliefs, even Christian beliefs. There are things like that that we've been trying to express to ourselves that just haven't been coming across quite those same ways. It's interesting to hear it from these perspectives.
yeah, because the memories that I have on the other side is it's all unconditional love. It's all an experience. And we may choose to experience on Earth, which is one of the harder planets to incarnate onto, but it's also a beautiful, I mean, it's one of the most beautiful planets as well. But here there are just a plethora of matrices that we can get entangled in that help us to grow. Okay. And so all these, all of the stuff people look around and say, oh my God, there's so much chaos. There's so many bad things happening. It's like, you know what? There's no more bad things happening now than has always happened. What is happening, however, is that people are waking up and they're being able to shine their light into the darkness and they're seeing more. And no longer are they allowing people to tell them how they're supposed to respond. They're taking personal responsibility for themselves. They're growing as individuals and they're like, this is not acceptable. What do you mean that killing people? What's going on? No longer are we willing to just listen to what people say. And I think that's, one of the things that's happening right now. There's almost like this revolution of alternative healing, which is the field that I'm in. But alternative healing, because people are saying, hey, food can be medicine. If I drink water, it's okay. Yeah, if I have a little caffeine, whatever, everything in balance, I could have a little sugar. It's not the greatest, but I can have a little sugar. I can have a little of this, everything in moderation. But I have to feed my body, and we have to feed our minds, and we have to feed our emotions, and we have to put good stuff into us, which includes the things that we watch on television, the programs that we listen to. And thank goodness for programs like this where people can, have an alternative to hear, other perspectives. They may not agree with me, but at least they can hear another perspective that might get them thinking, on a different pathway all of their own. And so, after I wrote the book, then I decided everybody was so excited about finding other walk-ins that we wanted to kind of have our own little walk-in group. And so we then, I put it out there that I wanted to do a walk-in conference. And I had met Alan Steinfeld, who introduced me to Neil Gar with Portal to Ascension. And Neil's like, yeah, I've been wanting to do a walk-in. Yeah, let's do this. And so we had the first walk-in conference. And after that conference, I was inundated by people saying, oh my God, this isn't my exact experience, but this is what happened to me. And I kept trying to individually, I just couldn't keep up with the email and stuff that was coming in, plus the stuff
Awesome.
from the book alone. And so we decided that I have to do something. And then my guides woke me up, and they gave me an idea about forming an international organization that could serve as a support system, that could serve as a community, that could serve as a safe place for people to share their stories, to talk about what's going on with them, to receive education. And at that time, I started what's called Wish Alliance, walk-ins, indigos, starseeds, and hybrids. And that has grown into now what's called the Galactic Alliance, because we've had so many people say, well, hey, wait a minute, I'm an angelic. How come you're not saying Wish doesn't say angelic? It's like, we'll just do galactic. That way, that way
It's
it's
hard to come up with an
infuriating.
acronym with so many extra letters coming down the path, I'm sure.
That's right. It's like, hey, let's just do the Galactic Alliance and be finished with it. And so now we have meetings every Monday and every Thursday, and we have speakers who are, like on Monday, my co-host is Barbara Lamb this month. And
Okay.
we have Preston Dennett that's coming. He's going to be one of our speakers at the end of the month. And I've got Ray Hernandez coming. And, then I have the Thursday night group. And we're getting ready to start focusing on gratitude because of the holiday season coming up and Thanksgiving. And, it's not about, the turkey and the dressing, but we're looking at it as, just a gratitude for being here on this earth at this time, because what an amazing time to be on this planet.
And
So
is it an online group or is it an in-person group
no,
or?
it's a wish. It's a wish. Sorry, it is a Zoom group. And so
Okay.
anyone can join. All they have to do is go to the galacticalliance.org and sign up to be on our mailing list. And every week we'll send out the announcements. And then they can decide if they want to come to any or all of them. There's no charge at all, because the desire is to be able to bring education to people so that they can um, more readily identify and drop into the essence of who they truly are. And maybe some of these speakers will help to wake someone up, or they'll say something in a different way that they're like, oh my God, I've been feeling that way forever. Here's another person that I can identify with. And so we also have what's called family reunion. And that's when anyone can talk, anyone can share. On the front page of the galacticalliance.org, on that landing page, if people scroll down, we have little mini meetings also. So, like on the first Saturday of every month, I have a walk in group just for walk ins. And we have Arcturian groups, and we have angelic groups, and we have starseed groups, we have paranormal groups, we have a plethora of groups that anyone can, they can just plug in to any or all of them if they want to. And there's no charge for any of these.
Oh,
And
awesome.
then, yeah. And so we have that's going on. And then, my guides, the entire time I've been here, they really push me. It's the go bigger, go bigger, go bigger, go bigger, go. And I've done everything. When they first started telling me that, I was actually in a healing session and I was working on someone, and they said go bigger, and I literally jumped and went ah. They're like, oh, what's going on? Because I turned, it was like someone just bent down and said, go bigger, right in my ear. And I mean, honestly, it just startled me. And so, when they want to get my attention, that's kind of how they know they have to give me the big letters, the big flashing signs to get it. So it's like, hello, are you listening down there? But they're constantly pushing and telling me to go bigger. And I thought that was to expand my practice, then to bring in other practitioners, and then to start little speaking groups. And then I started having big conferences, and, so it's always go bigger, go bigger, go bigger. And after I got the Galactic Alliance going, I thought, okay, this is an international group. You can't get much bigger than that. We're broadcasting out, and they did it again. Go bigger. I'm like, okay, you got to give it to me. What do you want me to do now? And so I've started what's called the Conscious Awakening Network. And we
Okay.
actually have these programs on Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV. The apps are, if you have those programming apps, our app is free. We also we have a website. We have telephone apps that people can get from any of the iOS or even the Android app stores that have all of these programs. And I probably got 200 or 300 hours, and we're only a month old. And
Wow.
so this is really growing exponentially. We have podcasts out on every major platform. And so if they tell me to go bigger again, I don't know. I have no clue what that could be. But
Where do you want me to go?
I know, I'm like, "Wah!" At one point, honestly, I was working 5 days a week. I had 7 circles a month that I was teaching, and I was having workshops on the weekend because they kept saying, go bigger, go bigger. And they weren't giving me any true direction. And so I did everything, and I learned all these healing modalities, and I tried all these different avenues. And finally, it's just like, I just give up. I don't know what you want. And then, of course, the book came through, and then I thought that was the go bigger. And then the conference, I thought that was the go bigger. And now I do things with Neil on a regular basis and Alan Steinfeld, and we have conferences and different things. But most everything that I try to do has no charge. So people can download the Conscious Awakening Network app free of charge. They can watch any or all of the content that's on there. And it's not just the one show that I do, the Cosmic Conversations. I'm so slack. I put everybody else's stuff up. I need to get my stuff up there too. But we have so much wonderful programming for people that, if they're looking for any kind of guidance or meditations or, a healer, something like that, they can go to the Galactic Alliance and look there, because we have probably we have our ambassadors, and these are people who provide services or sessions to people. Some of them are free of charge, some of them are charged, and they can get a hold of these individuals and contact them. So,
Well, I'll definitely be including the links in the show notes for them as well. So hopefully we can cross that as well.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
You've been talking about working with Neil. His episode should be actually airing just before this one, not long before. And I think Alan actually is going to come on and do an interview as well here soon. So that'll be good. But you guys are having the Portal to Ascension Conference in San Diego in April, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, this is going to be exciting because this will be the first in live conference that Portal to Ascension has put on since the pandemic.
Yes.
And so, we're looking forward to it because I think it's just going to be a big hug fest. Everybody getting to see everybody again. And, a lot of people are venturing out now, going to conferences and things. But, this will be really great because Portal to Ascension has a phenomenal website and has phenomenal programming on there. And so this is just going to be kind of like an extension of the work that Neil is already providing to people. So if people haven't checked it out, they do need to go to portaltoascension.org, sign up, because he's got thousands, I guess, hours of programming on there now, but a lot of it is free of charge. And so people can sign up and they can get that information. And, the beautiful thing about what we're all doing is this is true co-creation without any kind of competition whatsoever, because we all want to get these messages out. We all want people to have access to this kind of information, and having these types of these live conferences are great, because then we just start to build more and more synergy together. And then as we have more and more synergy, that energy goes out and it begins to affect the collective consciousness, and more people then start to, feed into that energy. And so I always get excited when we have these kind of conferences. So I hope everybody out there will sign up and, come to San Diego and check us out.
Well, I think I will actually be there as well. So it'll be good to see you in person. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, we'll have a booth for one of the sponsors. And so
Awesome.
It'll be the Galactic Alliance and Conscious Awakening Network.
And are you going to be giving a talk there as well, or?
Yeah, I'm gonna be talking. I think, of course, I'll be telling what I'm doing, but I also want to talk a little bit about soul wounding, because I have found, one of the things that I have been working with my collective on is to find out, okay, so I know I came in and I know you guys wanted me to come in for a specific purpose. I have a very specific mission. I was already out there. But what I'm doing is I'm clearing a lot of the old soul wounding that was left in this body. And it's easy. All of us have soul wounds. And we come in to clear these kinds of things. And they really are what I call programs in the background that are running the subconscious mind, because we don't understand that the true vehicle, the true animation of this body is our souls. And so this is nothing more. I used to call it our meat suit, but now I've come to understand it really is our space suit for our souls to be able to operate on planet Earth. No
I
different
hadn't really
than
thought
the
of it like that
Malaysian.
before. That's a really interesting way to look at it.
Yeah. And that's basically what it is. And so our souls are motivating around in these biological spacesuits. And these biological spacesuits have not just neurology and the central nervous system and all of the neurological information that's going on, but it also has all this other information that's going on out here in what we call the causal bodies, and the emotional body, the buddhic body, the christic. All of our bodies out here has information that's feeding in. And we also have this crystalline grid that goes around the body. And that's one of the things I work with people on is I'll do like a crystalline blueprint reading. And I can go in and I can tell them where their soul origin is. I can tell them, if they had a name that was given to them when they first broke off from the source energy.
Mm.
I shouldn't say broke off, because what I was shown is, gosh, that's a whole nother conversation. But anyway, an extension, let's say, of the source energy. And so I
Individuated itself, but is still
it,
connected.
yeah, exactly. It's an individuation. I used to call it fractal energy, but it's not really fractalized. It's an expansion of. Okay,
Hmm.
it's an individualized aspect of. And I was shown just like this huge plasma field that everything, it gets morphed into different things, and it goes off and it has these little spider web um, energetic conduits, for a lack of better terms. But initially my guides were showing me, when I was asking them about my main concern with my guides initially was, did I kidnap this body? Did I kick out a soul? What the heck happened? And they're like, oh, no, no, no. And that's when they began to talk to me about soul contracts. They talked to me about pre birth planning and how we all have these agreements that we put in place, these goals, basically. It's our action plan for planet Earth, if you will, these things that we want to accomplish in place. And so within all of that, that's where you start to bring out these soul wounds. And it can be from past lives. I've worked with people who are clearing, they have come into situations here on the planet that are so horrific that is actually allowing them to clear, like the Orion War energy that imprinted on their souls, things that they were witness to, family members that they lost. When we look at the galactic, so many people are like it's an us and a them, and it's not. We're all one big universal family. Gaia herself is a conscious being. And when this planet was being formed, she's like an eighth or ninth density being that chose to put her consciousness into this rock, okay, into this earth, to animate it. And she herself is having an experience. And Gaia is actually the one that is in this process of transitioning from one density into the other. And
Mm.
because we are energetic beings, we are here, we have this connection through our electromagnetic systems with the earth, we too are able to have this transition. And so for me, that's what the ascension is about. It's not about us coming into our light bodies. We already have our light bodies, they're just covered up by our spacesuit. Okay. And so when we drop that, we're in our light bodies. So we're actually transitioning as Gaia transitions, as she raises her consciousness. And that's no different than when I and my collective came and are working in this earth grid. We are just a different density. But Gaia herself is transforming. And as we transform, we will also be able to move into a different version of ourselves. We'll be able to move into that light body phase of ourselves. And our consciousness is changing as well. And so, for me, the ascension is more about an ascension, dropping into that essence of who we truly are as a human species, recognizing that we're souls having a human experience. And the ascension is about Gaia and how we are going to transition. But over the last, 20 years ago, we could not have had this kind of conversation. Maybe even 15 years ago, we could not have had this kind of conversation. So look at how our consciousness is expanding. And that is a second type of ascension that's going on, because we have this consciousness that's consciously moving from one phase to another. My belief and what my guide showed me is that in 2012, when this planet was washed over by a plethora of all types of photonic energy, that the human species, every human on this planet, actually transitioned into the fourth dimension. However, fourth dimension is a place that is an opportunity. You can move into the fifth dimension, but you've also got to clear all the third dimensional stuff. So it was kind of like the garden. The seeds had been planted, the sprouts were growing. That's your fourth dimension. And so it's easy for people, one day they're like, oh, they're in their Buddhic consciousness, and the next day they hear bad news and they're back down in third dimension, because we live on a third dimensional planet, and we operate our physicality within the 3D, but our minds are operating 5, 6, 7D and beyond. And a lot of people have moved past even that 4D that we all came into. And I mean, even my parents, I just got back from a visit with them, and they're in their late 80s. And it's amazing to see how their consciousness is shifting and changing over time. They grew up where doctors were God and everything,
Oh, yeah.
They're even questioning things. They're questioning the news. Oh my God, what a revelation. Everyone is waking up, in their own way. And I always tell people, they say, well, what happens if, we don't make it? It's not a race. Maybe some people will choose to go through a third dimensional experience here on this planet. That's not a big deal, because it's not a race. It's not like there's a timer that says we have to ascend here. We have to ascend now, or you lose your chance. Sorry, guys. That's religious dogma. The beauty of the universe is we're always ascending. We're always learning. We're always transitioning. Forever is a long time. We've got forever to work on these things and to expand and have all these, multiplicity of experiences.
I used to be in such a rush for everything to happen right now. And it's really only been the last couple of years when I've got to step back and go, okay, enjoy this, breathe, enjoy where you're at, because it's not going to always be here this way,
That's right. This is a really beautiful planet. And from what I understand, or the teachings that have come to me, and they may not be true for everyone, but what my guides and collective has shared with me is that on this planet, even the insect life, everything that we have here is a reflection of what's out there. And so if we have ladybugs on this planet, there are ladybugs being on another planet. If we have grasshoppers here, they're grasshopper beings. Praying mantis, we already know about the mantis beings because they visit quite frequently to this planet. And so everything that we have here, there's even, the planet with, the rocks, the trees, the grasses, they all have their own consciousness. And they are all, even if they're in a second density state of consciousness here, they still have consciousness. And they are progressing, and they will be progressing with Gaia into their new states of consciousness. But everything that we have here is reflected out there.
I couldn't think of a more beautiful way to look at it. I love that. I know we're getting towards the end here. Do you have any last words of wisdom you wanted to share with everybody before we signed off?
I just want everybody to know that you are so much more powerful than you could even begin to imagine, and that you are never, ever, ever, never alone. It is impossible to be alone, and that we all are continuing our evolution. Even if we drop this spacesuit, we're continuing. There is no death. Been there, done that. There is no death. And so, I hope that people will really take solace in that, because when you understand these basic truths, then you're able to more fully embrace what life really has to offer for you.
What a wonderful message. Thank you so much for being here with us today, Sheila.
Thank you. It was so fun.
You have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you again for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Exchange, and I want to once again thank Sheila Seppi for joining us this week and sharing her incredible story. Last but most certainly not least, I want to give a special thanks to all of our listeners. You are the reason I continue to make these podcasts and keep spreading the word about these amazing awakened babes. Please tell your friends about us, follow us on Spotify, subscribe to us on YouTube or wherever else you're listening, and please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast. Every podcast says that because it really does help with visibility. You can also support us on Patreon or connect with us on the social media of your choice. We are at Awakened Exchanges on Facebook and Instagram, and at Awakened Exchanges on Twitter. Thanks again for listening to Awakened Exchanges. Have a blessed day.